Hello and welcome to yet another amazing episode of Genealogy Quick Start. I'm Shamel Jordan, the producer and host. Just not too long ago, I met our special guest. I did not know her, but I've learned of her. And I said, wow. And I hadn't met her sight unseen. I sent her an email to ask her to be on my show. And unfortunately, we couldn't connect. And then so happens I'm walking along at a conference and I see her and I'm like, hey, who are you? And she's like, I'm speaking here. And I said, you want to be on my show? And she's like, you already asked me to be on your show. And I'm like, who are you? She tells me who she is. And finally, we've been able to connect. And man, her quick start will not disappoint. Have you researched the occupations of your ancestors? It is always fascinating when people are able to make the types of connections that Jessica Trotter has made. She is our quick start special guest today, and she will be doing occupational hazard, finding an elusive ancestor's employment records. Now, Jessica started off not easily. She had a lot of challenges, but once she got into it, she really was able to find some juicy things. And speaking of wonderful things, we are always grateful for the amazing quick starts of our regulars. And today they have a really cool one called Who Signed on the Dotted Line? I've always wondered, how do you know if that's their mark on those documents? I know that signatures, as we all know, that signatures are a fantastic way to be able to distinguish one ancestor from another. But is it really their signature? How do you know? Jim and Michael are going to share that with us today. So let's bring them on. First up, columnist and editor, James M. Beidler. Ah! And genealogy tip of the day, Michael John Neill.
Jim really has to quit taking those unregulated supplements he buys on the internet.
Yeah, I think this is enough hair for me. So,
yes, and if you're out there, please, we want to know where you are. If you're in a genealogy group, most definitely tell us about that genealogy group. So, hey, how you guys doing? We're talking about occupations today. You guys have any interesting ancestral occupations? Maybe occupations that you wish you had? What's going on with you in the world of occupations?
mine are so boring. It's Pennsylvania German farmer stacked on top of Pennsylvania German farmer stacked on top of Pennsylvania German farmer.
Well, my response to the boring comment is there are no boring ancestors, only researchers who haven't done adequate amounts of work. And that comes from me having probably as many farmer ancestors as you've got. And the one occupation I kind of thought was neat was what I refer to as a master windmill mechanic. He lived in the north of Germany and he worked, I forget the German word for his occupation, but what it boiled down to was they had windmills in the north and he worked on the windmills and he moved from one place to another because he was that good at it. But most of mine were farmers too, with the occasional other occupation.
So, Jim, since they're so boring, what type of ancestors occupation do you wish you had?
Oh man, I wish I had some businessmen or maybe even a politician. I don't know. I don't know how much I want to fight for that. So.
Very cool. I always want the criminal ancestors, the bad guys, because they leave records. It wouldn't be wrong to have a politician or What was the other one? Oh, you said a businessman.
Yeah.
Would be
Yeah.
cool. Hey, Judy, what kind of occupations do your ancestors have? And what do you have any dream occupations for your ancestors? Thank you so much for being with us here today. So let's go ahead and let's pause on the occupations and let's get started with your quick start. I really always enjoy your creativity. And you do.
Pausing.
Hey,
Go ahead.
who do we have here? Who's that? We have
This is Ramona. Since you mentioned pausing, she's showing up, but she also reminded me to keep on task so we can get done in time for her to get fed. So,
So our quick start for today is who signed on the dotted line. So, what prompted this quick start?
Well, for me, when people talk about how their ancestor's name was spelled, or they often phrase it, well, my ancestor spelled it this way, or my ancestors changed his name, and so forth. An awful lot of the records that we see were written by somebody else. So that was the first thing. And then even when it is a document that contains a signature, some people mistake the original that has a signature for some sort of recopied document where it's a handwritten clerk handwriting it into a will book or a deed book or something like that, and trying to imitate the signature. So that's important to differentiate.
right, because I remember several years ago seeing a somewhat popular blogger just all genealogically excited because she had their signature. And of course, the signature looked just like the text of the will because she had a record copy of the will out of the will ledger from the courthouse. Had he signed the original will? Yes. But that's not what she was looking at. She was looking at the record copy where the handwriting is all the same because the clerk's job was to copy it, not to make an artistic rendering of the document.
Although,
Once in a while they do. We'll see a couple of those. They
yes,
sometimes try.
yeah,
They sometimes
yep,
try.
yep, yep.
It always depends in genealogy. And of course, we know spelling doesn't count. So let's stop being with that behavior. All right, let's go ahead and get started with who signed on the dotted line. So, step one is to choose an ancestor. So, it sounds simplistic, but are some ancestors better to choose than others?
Well, don't accuse us of gender bias, but historically, most of the signatures are going to be of men.
And on top of that, men with a little bit of money and some social standing. The wealthier a woman was, the more likely you are to maybe see at least where she made her mark or something. But typically, it's males that have a little bit of cashola, especially if we're talking before 1900.
Yes. Yeah.
Is it true that people, even if they could write, sometimes they would sign with their mark?
You're going to see that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm jumping the gun.
And sometimes not just a simple X, but something that's a little more distinctive.
Yeah, we got a couple of those too.
Yep.
Yeah, you guys I saw some new stuff just preparing for the show today. So I'm looking forward to hearing about them. All right. So we've chosen an ancestor. No worry on the gender bias here. Sometimes facts are just facts. Demographics are just demographics. Step two is to then bring up step two. Maybe.
Well, it's really important you choose your ancestor. Yes.
To define a period of time to search. Okay, so we have our time period.
And I would just say, adding on to that, it's not necessarily just the time period of your ancestor's life. You're very likely not to find something from when they were young, for instance. And then on the other end of things, there may be things like deeds that they signed that were not recorded for a century after their death. So yeah, you need to be flexible in that time period that you're defining.
Yes, I hear that deeds could be in the family. We had a special guest. His deed was in his family for over 150 years. Amazing. Okay, so define this, the period of time is really crucial. So then we move on to, is there like a time when people started signing? Was it
Usually
adulthood?
typically when they reach the age of majority, and then even when they're younger, they're less likely to sign a lot of documents until I would say middle age or older. But there's some exceptions to that. But
Okay. So we have our time period. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, you saw my mouth open. Yeah, the one exception to the age of majority is if they were petitioning for a guardian. Because typically they would sign their own petition at least from age 14 on, which was when they would generally be asked about who they wanted as a guardian. If it's under 14, it's usually the surviving parent that is petitioning.
Fantastic. You guys always have all these little tidbits that are just so fantastic. All
Hey,
right.
we didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday, you know.
Maybe the chicken truck. No, I'm just chicken cat. Step 3 is I was having the nightmares about a chicken truck. Step 3, list records which may have signatures. So which records are those?
well, the census record probably not, unless they're the census taker. But a marriage application, wills, land records, petitions in a pension file. Those would be the big, maybe a land warrant, or if they assign that to somebody else, those would be the main things that a person would contemplate. But if there's a court action, they might have signed an affidavit, or their lawyer might have signed it for them. In a record like that, probably anything except the census is one that people, and you don't normally sign your own death certificate. The thing about, well, usually you don't, but although, sometimes zombies, whatever, but you might want to keep in mind if the person was an informant it depends upon what time period we're looking at here. If they were an informant on a death certificate, then they might have signed someone's death certificate, but not the deceased themselves.
Of course, yeah, and also as witnesses to a will, you find that your ancestor died without a will. It's like, oh, geez, but they may have witnessed somebody else's will, or they may have witnessed somebody else's deed, and that opens up other potential for the signature.
Or they might have been a bondsman as well, and probate
bondsman,
documents. Right.
Yep. And
church records would be another one where I would say they probably aren't signing in church records typically.
Unlikely, although I mean, I've seen some German church registers, certain parishes where the father signed the child's baptism. Not the whole, not the body of it.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Very interesting. So it sounds like the records that may have signatures are generally probate records.
That's the number one. That's the number one, but you shouldn't be stopping there. That should be your starting point. And when we get to look at the documents, I'll also show you another one called a sheriff's jury, which was essentially the way you appraised property for real property when there wasn't a will in the 18th century, 19th century.
Okay, very cool. So we have our list of targets that we want to try to get, and we're moving on to step 4, which is to locate the original records with signatures. So talk to us about that, because sometimes we can't get those things.
Yeah, and sometimes you won't be able to. But to me, the important thing is making the extra effort to differentiate, like in the example Michael was giving in the beginning. Have you seen the original will, or have you seen the will recopied into a will book? The recopied version, to untrained eyes will say, is going to look like an original record, but as Michael was saying, no, that doesn't have a signature from the individual. It's a clerk, maybe not imitating really at all the way it was written, but just making out the letters. Whereas the loose paper document, that original, that's your gold, because that's going to have all the original text and the original signatures of the person making the will, of usually 2 or 3 witnesses, and there may be the register signature, something like that too.
Fantastic. So we're going to try to get the ones with the original signatures. And you guys have some beautiful documents with signatures. Thanks for sharing those. And we're going to share those in a second. Step 5 is then to use record copies for hints if no originals. So do you want me to start sharing for you guys to tell the hints, or?
Well, just a quick comment, and then move
Sure.
on to it. Is that that there are times when the original is not extant, and this recopied version is going to be the best you're going to get, and so then you want to see what clues you can get off of that.
Yes, of course, like at your last word, I get it right. So let's take a look at what we have in your documents. You guys gave us some great documents. Why did they do that? Oh, there we go. Here we are. Maybe. There we are.
Yeah, so this is a Philadelphia County deed, and the thing that's salient to our discussion is the way it's indexed, the way it is captioned in the recopying and the header, is that the person selling is named John Lynn. However, when we and that's just showing, I'm sorry, that's fainter than I was hoping it would be. So John Lynn, and this is a real truncation of his actual name, which if we go to the next slide, we see that the clerk on this recopied copy did reproduce his signature, at least its full the full verbiage, that it's Johannes von der Lint. And Lynn is just a contraction of Lint. So, if you were only looking for somebody named von der Lint or der Lint or Lint, you wouldn't find this John Lynn. So
how was it in the index?
Lynn.
Oh
Lynn.
My goodness.
Yeah, the way it is in the header. Yeah, in the header.
Yeah, it's both in the header and in the text. It's only the signature reveals the authentic name, and this is not uncommon. I mean, often it's just a variant of a little bit of difference, or translating a name like Johannes to John, which when it's a first name, it's not a big deal. But on the surname, that will really throw you for a curve.
I love this. This is a great example, beyond signatures, that indexes are quite fallible, which we already know, but this is like an extreme case of like a little nuance. Love that.
And this is the so-called sheriff's jury. This is a document from Berks County, Pennsylvania, and I'm just kind of fascinated by this process. This is when somebody dies without a will, they have real estate, and how are you going to put a value on it? Well, you don't have in the 1700s and 1800s, you don't have real estate appraisers who are going to look for 3 comparable properties and measure everything. No, you have 12 guys who go for a beer in the local tavern, and they because seriously, some of the reports on these sheriff's juries, they even say which tavern they met at. So, yeah, and they would decide whether the real estate, whether it was a big enough farm that it could be divided among a few heirs, or whether it's like, nope, one heir gets it all, and then they have to pay the other heirs, things like that. And my ancestor Conrad Beidler, he must have been a trusted. Well, he was the miller of the neighborhood, which was somewhat of a position of trust. So he was on a bunch of these sheriff's juries, so I got several iterations of his signature. But the thing here again, you get 12 of them. It's a 12.
Yes, this is very nice.
Yeah, and this is something that a lot of people overlook. That my ancestor died without a will and he didn't have land. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, try sheriff's juries.
Are sheriff's juries a Commonwealth type of thing, or does it go beyond? Could it be other states?
They weren't called that in other states, and there weren't always 12 men that did it. But it was common in other locations. I give you a real short synopsis of what was going on. If the property couldn't be divided equitably among all the heirs, the judge would appoint 3 men that knew the value. They would say, nope, you can't divide it, or yes, you can. Here's where we're putting the lines. And then if it could be partitioned, they would do it. If it couldn't, the judge would say, sell it. And if you want it, you buy it. The judge he would take their recommendation based on their local, usually it'd be men within the township or that part of the county he would assign to go out and make that decision. But like Jim said, it's usually somebody they had to be not the riffraff, but someone whose reputation was well known, a businessman or a farmer, as the case may be, who would have knowledge of values and things of that type.
But I bet they still went out for a beer to do their work.
That could be.
It's, and this is just isolating the signature of my 5 great grandfather, Conrad Beidler, when he was one of the sheriff's jurors of the Gottfried Gring estate.
And Judy wants to know, is that like true wax right there?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is an original document for sure.
Original.
I don't know. I think that's old beer foam is what it is.
That would be pretty nasty beer if it was red. So, yeah, and one of the things, and this is kind of bonus points here, not exactly what we've been talking about, but Conrad Beidler's signature evolved because he grew up as a typical Pennsylvania German, and then when he became a miller, he started working with more English-speaking people, became bilingual, and you can see in 1760 when he witnesses an estate in his native, what's now Montgomery County, he's still using German cursive script. By 1775, he's changed some of his letters, but you see the B is still the German cursive script. And then 1799, when he makes his will, he's pretty well anglicized. His R, his B, they reflect a man who's kind of made it, and has.
Now, is that his actual signature from that will, or is that a record copy transcription?
That's the actual signature. Yep.
I love it. That is so cool.
Because you can see the remnant of the seal on the right hand side of it.
Yes, I see the black. That's the black, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next one you've popped up, this one's from 1800, very early 19th century, and a couple of comments about this. John DeMoss, he makes a mark, which he's got a rather unique mark. It's not
That's
his
so
initial D.
wild.
It's not his initial D, and I'm not sure just why he chose that mark. But the one thing I thought was really interesting when I looked at this, the way the John in his name is written, that J looks an awful lot, which is kind of a weird looking J, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Looks a lot like the J in Josias, one of the witnesses. And I've wondered if the witness wrote the name, and I'm speculating here, and then John made his
Mark.
because he would have been up in years at this point. He died 4 or 5 years after this, and he was in his 80s when he died. And this kind of goes back to that comment about, someone who was literate and maybe did write. Maybe at a certain point in their life, they were no longer able to do that, but they could make their mark, but they couldn't physically sign their name. I'm kind of speculating here, but he did make he didn't make an X. He didn't make his initial.
Right. I love his mark. He was like, this is my mark. That's really cool.
He made a little mark there.
That's really cool.
This is a much later example, but again, this is an original document. We talk about, and the concerns of, is it original? Is it a transcription or what have you? Sometimes it can be hard to tell when you're looking at digital images of things, if it's the original record or a reproduction of it. But this, you can see the writing is different in all these places. These are their actual signatures on this document. Sometimes I like to look and see, especially when they sign the same one twice, or how close are those signatures. And for Henry's G appears in the bottom one, but not in the middle one. I'm not sure just what happened there with that dot. But those are 3 siblings all signing off on their fathers.
I remember I had a friend, and we found documents for him while we were in a meeting at work, and his father or grandfather left one letter out of his name, and he pondered all day, why didn't he write his name right? And I'm like, calm down, pay attention to how often you sign your name and how you might change it. No, this is nice. I've always been taught, with Bible records, that's the first thing you look at is, does everything look the same, or does it look like someone added over time?
And this obviously is not Nancy Rampley's real signature. If that has to be explained to you, I really don't know what to say.
This is the control slide.
Exactly, precisely. If you go back down for a hot second, this is an example when transcriptions they were done by hand, but they weren't done writing it out in script. It's a typed transcription. And for a while, I wonder, why is it all typed except that notary public thing is written out? But then I realized this was probably done in 1909, and their typewriter couldn't write that curvature. They couldn't type the curvature. So everything is typed except the notary seal. They're trying to reproduce it there. In the next image, I want to make sure we stay on our time scale here. This is an example. This is the record copy of Peter Recker's will from 1742-43, New or Old Style there. But he did make his mark, and his mark, as we mentioned before, this time the clerk tried to reproduce his mark, and he made an R. He didn't do the funky thing my other relative did. Peter's mark was actually his last initial. Now, how fancy it looked, I don't know. Was it a big old flourishing thing? I have no idea. All I know is that it was some kind of an R. Obviously, it was his initial there. But this is a record copy of that will. I wish I had the real thing, but I don't. This is all that I've got of that.
Oh, that's so interesting. Very cool. Different types of marks. See, you're like a different. You're different, and you come from different people. Doing different things. Is that the last one? Yes, it was.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Let us go through the steps of this quick start, which is who signed on the dotted line. Step 1, choose an ancestor. Step 2, determine a time period to search. Step 3, list records which may have signatures. And they gave you fantastic lists. Step 4, locate the original records with signatures. And of course, step 5, use record copies for hints if no original exists. Thank you so much for this fantastic quick start, and we'll catch you later.
We're signing off.
All right. All the way off. I hear you. Bye-bye. Fantastic. Give me 1 second. Wonderful. Yes, this is the time I have been waiting for. When Jessica shared this quick start with me, it was just, I'm like, this was made for TV, for a quick start, because it's just so interesting, and it goes against things that we've learned, like not against it, but they weren't helpful for Jessica. And then things that we have heard about again and again, she just tapped into it, and wow. So let me bring on our special guest today, genealogy researcher and presenter, Jessica Trotter.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Hello, Jessica. So it was nice that we got a chance to meet, and not to date the show, but Jessica played Genealogy Feud. She was on the inaugural, and I hadn't even met her. And I was like, she came in, she was like, "Oh, I'll play." I said, "This girl is game. I'm digging her. I can't wait to hang out with her." So Jessica, thank you so much for agreeing to be here.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me.
I have to ask you the question that I ask everyone, which is your 1-minute genealogy story, which is how you got started and when you knew you were hooked on genealogy.
I actually started for a Girl Scout badge.
Yay, Girl Scouts!
2nd or 3rd grade, I was plopped down next to my very lovely step-great-grandfather, who it was at like a Christmas gathering, and he told me all kinds of stuff, and I did everything I needed for the badge, and I put it down for quite a bit of time, but I picked it back up actually in his last year in particular. He talked to me. He remembered that. And I just, from then on, I really have been going at it as much as I could, a little bit around college, because that slowed things down quite a bit, but it also taught me a lot. And I have been pretty much at it since I was 18. So it's been great.
So you two are a baby genealogist. Jim is a baby genealogist. Jonathan Webb Dice is a baby genealogist. Michael Strauss. There's so many baby genealogists out there. They're really cute. Michael used to tell stories about how nobody would drop him off at the Historical Society, so he would just get his stuff and he would just walk. It's so cute. So no, that has to be amazing, because you got the chance to talk to the people.
Not enough. It's still never enough time.
Good. Okay.
But,
I'm like, she has everything. She has everything, but you don't. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Jessica, I love your quick start. Let's bring up your title here, which is, and it's a long one. Normally, I don't let Jim and Michael have these many words. But you needed them. Occupational hazard: finding an elusive ancestor's employment records. Like, how nice is that? So, Jessica, I guess we should probably just get started, because you have a lot of stuff here. So, let's talk about step 1 is to do general research. So tell us, kind of like set up which lineage we're talking about here, and what general research did you do?
So where I was started was I was asked to do some research by my grandmother and her sister, and it was they just knew, they hadn't been told things, and they really wanted to know. And my grandmother is just, she wants the dirt on everything, and that's sort of where we started. But I didn't have, their grandmother was adopted, not formally, but ended up with another family. And so we I didn't have a lot of information to start with. They basically kind of left me with, they thought the person's name that I was looking for, their grandfather's name was Henry Massey, and they thought that he was a policeman in Detroit. But he's not somebody who showed up in the census. He's, we all start there, and he's not there, at least not in any way I could recognize him.
So everyone always tells you, do the census, and it wasn't working for you.
Exactly. And I ended up finding his wife, the child, but never him.
Yes, that has happened to me too. You find the relatives, but they're just like in the wind. Like, where are they?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you did your diligence.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to move on to step 2. You continued, you persevered, right, Jessica?
Well, exactly.
So you decided to move on to city directories. Why did you choose city directories?
Because if I'm not finding them in the census, that's the best thing to catch the between years. And we were fairly certain of Detroit. And fairly certain, we knew the last name, or we were fairly certain of the last name, but it's really sort of looking, okay, it's Massey is the name, and what can we find? And it worked. In this particular case, there were 2 Masseys who were policemen.
Okay. That's what I love about city directories. You get to learn. That's like one of the best places to learn occupation. So the city directories didn't let you down, huh?
They did not.
All right. So I'm trying to think, should I share some of the slides as we go along?
Either way actually would work. For me.
All right. Let's talk. Let's chat. Let's go through. So you looked at and we're going to share. We have all of these. So you looked through the city directories, and you found them. And then step 3, you went ahead and looked at newspapers. Newspapers don't let you down, do they, Jessica?
They do not. And again, this is one of those, lots of things show up. Even, I was watching earlier, even the farmers will show up in the newspaper doing stuff. But right or wrong, I just didn't think about how old a police beat was. There were police beats in this time period. There were police beats long before this time period. But he shows up in the newspaper. Actually, both of the Masseys who were policemen show up in the newspaper in different articles, and that was helpful again to give me a little bit time and place and more ideas of where to look.
So the story was correct. They were policemen. We have 2 confirmations: city directories, newspapers, and so step 4 for you was then to search Percy for context. So tell us all about what is Percy.
So Percy is the periodical source index that's maintained by the Allen County Public Library. And I use it for a lot of different things, but one of the things that I'm very curious about when I kind of go into a project like this is if somebody has written about the job or the area that I am researching. And in this case, I was sort of at a standstill in records. So I was really kind of looking at it and thinking, okay, has anybody written about what it means to be a police officer in this period that I was researching, which was before the 1870 census, so like 1860s. And there was somebody from the Detroit Society of Genealogical Research in their magazine had been not only writing about police, but had actually gotten hold of original documents and abstracted them within their journal. So I'm looking at this journal. Percy isn't going to give you the full text, but it will give you the journal to track down. And I could go to my local library because I am actually in Lansing, Michigan, where this state archives is, and state library, and I could pull it off the shelf and look at it and say, okay. And then the next step.
And you're going to show us how we can get to this wonderful thing.
Oh, sure.
So Percy, like you said, it's great for just understanding. You were going with a idea of a subject.
Exactly.
You did not expect to get a bullseye.
No. No. Very lucky.
Exactly what you were looking for, but you did, and we're going to share that. And then step 5 was to locate primary sources. So let's go ahead and look at some of your slides
Yes.
here, and we can walk through how you started and where you went to. So what do we have here? This is what you knew.
This is just this is what I knew about their grandmother, and what we thought we knew was, we only had the only confirmation I had about his name was in a death certificate, and it's their uncle listing her parents, so I wasn't entirely sure he knew, but it was a good clue. So I had this stuff, and I just wanted to try and find more information about this guy.
Okay. And so here's a city directory. Tell us in this. Oh, so this is the brothers.
So in that top one, the 68, 69, you've got J.O. as a policeman, and then you've got the top one is H.R., who is a policeman.
Okay.
And there you can see two families, and if you look at more of them, you start to see these people all in the same general house, in the same house, excuse me. And that his wife was a Corey. So that 6971 is John Corey is living in 463rd Street, and then Henry is now living at 463rd Street. So I've got the people I knew. Augusta, his wife, was John's daughter, and Henry in the same household.
Fantastic. So yes, that's that cluster you got to stay on top of. And so this is the newspaper research. What do you have here? What did you learn from these newspapers?
Part of it was place and time, which is very helpful. But even in the, it gives me a flavor to add to my story, which I really, really appreciate. But it also, even in the second one, which is from the April 1868 one, it actually says policeman Henry Massey, who occupies rooms over the drugstore. So you've got a little bit more personal information on top of the actual criminal story.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. Wow. So where did you locate, what did you use to find these newspapers?
In this particular case, it was newspapers.com.
Okay, newspapers.com. I love newspapers.com.
They're a good source for the Detroit Free Press. So
yeah. All right, so tell us how you use Percy, because oh my gosh, Percy is so important to research.
I try things different ways, but a lot of what I do is I often am going down to the area that I'm looking for. So this is actually starting with a location search to Wayne County, Michigan. Which is where Detroit is. And then within that, doing kind of a keyword search. And that's how I got into this set of hits. Sometimes it just sort of depends on what kind of information I'm looking for. But recombining kind of search terms has helped me a lot in just sort of thinking about it different ways. But in this particular case, that's the applications. Somebody has then transcribed the actual applications for the police department for exactly the time period I needed.
This is fantastic. And what I love about Percy is that we, who all want to write books and stuff, right? We, as collectors of all of this stuff, creating and transcribing and putting our stuff into local genealogy and history newsletters and journals. I mean, my genealogy group, African American genealogy group in Philadelphia, I mean, it's not mine, but it is mine because I'm a member. But our newsletter is in Percy. So when we write stuff and we give it to the poor newsletter person who's always begging for stuff,
right?
Trying to help us so that in the future, our descendants and our family can find this wonderful stuff that we have located for them. So Percy is both ways when you think about it. Would you agree?
Yes. And I will tell you, it's like when I'm going to Allen County Public, and I do, and I love it, that it's because I know that they have all of this these newsletters, things for all over the country. And
All right, so now you're gonna get me on a tangent.
Yeah.
Allen County Public Library is Disney, like for genealogists. Like there's
Exactly.
3 Disneys, right? There's Salt Lake City,
Mhm.
there's Washington, D.C.,
Mhm.
and there's Allen County Public Library.
Exactly.
And so even if you can't get to, Allen County, you can interlibrary loan. Your library might be able to get copies, and some of these things could be on JSTOR. Heritage Quest used to have a lot of these things, but I don't know if that thing even exists anymore. Do you have any place that you get articles like this that you might?
Well, often it's a bit of a mix because I live in the capital in Lansing, Michigan. There's a lot that I can get from the genealogy collections between the state archives and the Library of Michigan are really good too. So that's a lot of what I do, but you can actually, there is a form associated with Percy where you can request directly from Allen County as well.
Oh, fantastic. So you can request it. In New York, you could just go to New York Public Library, rub the lion's nose on your way in, and head up to the genealogy room because they have them there too. All right, so let's see. What else do you have here? That was Percy, and I think you have, let me bring this up.
It's tracking down the originals. So I got the actual transcription in the newsletter, and then, or it's actually a journal that the society puts out, and told me I could find the originals at the Burton Historical Collection of the Detroit Public Library. So I'm going down to the main branch of the Detroit Public Library and get this beautiful old book where you have the forms that was filled out basically to become a policeman. And it asks all kinds of information. I mean, it's asking his birth date, where he was born, when he was naturalized, where he was naturalized, what his former job was, where he lived, how many people were in the household. For, when he was appointed, it actually, to go back to the first segment, it actually does have his signature. This part's all written by somebody else, but there is a signature in a totally different hand, and I've matched it to other signatures.
Wow.
And that by itself was really useful for me because they've got other places where I wasn't sure, and the 3 places that I have are all his signature. And then one of the reasons they asked me to do the research to begin with is because they thought something bad had happened, and they wanted to know what he did.
Oh, they were being nosy.
So in this, exactly, totally. So in this particular case, most people have, this one says appointed and then resignation is blank. His is a dismissal. Okay. So if you switch to the next one, everybody else's page is blank. This is just infractions until he is tossed off the police force.
All right. So what was up? What was going on with him?
I'm only reading into what I could in terms of the infractions. He was found sleeping someplace he shouldn't have been. He was at the bakery when he should have been out on patrol. And the kicker was he swears he was just chasing that person into the brothel. He wasn't actually visiting. It was the last straw. And then he disappears, basically. And in that, can't remember what year that was, but I think it was 69, 1870 census, he doesn't show up. And his wife says she's a widow.
Oh my goodness. So it's I was chasing them into the brothel, chasing someone. Yes. I was doing my job. He was doing he was policing through the brothel.
Exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I love that. Those are fantastic documents. So what step were we on? So you found, I am impressed that the Detroit Public Library has manuscript collections.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's very nice. I need to come and hang out at Detroit. Mm-hmm. And so then step 6 is to, of course,
document all of it.
Your findings.
Maybe write it up in this article that will show up in Percy someday.
Yay! Yes, yes, yes. Jessica, that was so fascinating. Were there any other things that you wanted to share with regards to this lineage? That other things that you might have found out about the Masseys?
Well, I will say that one of the things, so like I had found the two policemen. So the other policeman did end up being his older brother, which was cool. And
How did you prove that they were brothers? Because we just kind of saw them, right?
yes, so they actually are all in one household earlier,
Okay.
with their mother Jane, and a younger brother, a brother that's in between. No, the brother that's younger than Henry. And so I was able to kind of place them there and then kind of research back. That's a really fascinating line of kind of army brats that I didn't think of that time period as having army brats.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Their grandfather had been in the Napoleonic Wars. Their father had served in the same unit, and that's how their parents met.
Oh,
These kids were born all over the world because she traveled with the regiment. And it was just, it's a fascinating, and then the older brother actually served in the Civil War, so it's just interesting stuff that way. So it opened up a lot of doors once I could figure out kind of who he was.
yes.
And John was more truthful in everything, so I could always compare John's stuff to Henry's stuff, and that helped.
Very nice. Yes, they say there's at least 3 sides to each story. Mm-hmm. So you have 2 of them, mm-hmm. At least.
Yes.
That's amazing. Let's run through these steps mm-hmm. for this wonderful quick start. Jessica, thanks for sharing. Occupational hazard. Finding an elusive ancestor's occupation employment records. Step 1 is to do general research. Step 2 is to search city directories. Step 3 is to locate newspaper articles. Step 4 is to search Percy for context. And if you are Jessica and your ancestors are just dying to have their story told, Percy will go beyond context and take you to your ancestors. Step 5 is to then locate the primary sources from that Percy points you to and beyond. And then step 6 is then to document your findings. If you want to learn more and hang out more with Jessica, take a look at her blog, genieroadtrip.com. That's her mom and her grandmom on a cemetery road trip. I love that. That's exactly. So cool. And I think this one she was talking about, what's this blog? Black Homesteaders of the South. And I think when I met you, you were talking about Black homesteaders.
Yep.
Do you have Black homesteaders?
I have a couple. I have a few actually, but a couple I haven't done the full research on, and 2 that I've done a lot of research on. So yeah.
All right. So let's bring Michael back. Michael might have some homesteaders. Michael, do you have any Black homesteaders? You're on mute. But I know that was a definite no. You're on mute, Michael. Oh.
Okay. I just gave the answer to life, and I just gave the winning lotto ticket, so you all missed it. No, I do have homesteaders, but extended family, quite a few of them. I have my direct ancestors who homesteaded. They got the homestead, they sold the farm and came back to Illinois in short order. But I had siblings of ancestors that stayed, and one was kind of a self-promoter trying to get people there. He was a pastor turned entrepreneur in the 1870s, 1880s, encouraging. He was a German immigrant. He was encouraging natives of the same area to settle where he did.
Very cool.
But a lot of people, and that's true for most of them. Most of them, regardless of where they were from or ethnicity or their language or whatever, people settled in groups.
Yes.
You've always got to keep that in mind. If you're one dude or dudette is there, there's probably other dudes or dudettes there that they knew of. You just got to try to find them out if you can, who they are.
It's all
Agreed.
about the cluster fan club.
Exactly. Yes.
I think we should name it the dudette theory. We really, we got to kind of, everything is so male based or whatever. We got to call it the dudette theory. It's who are the dudettes in the neighborhood or something like that.
I like it. You're cleaning up for the, you weren't being male based, but you were telling the truth earlier.
I'm being facetious, but I'm not, because we sometimes forget when we're looking for extended family that also settled in the area. Some people tend to focus on the male relatives or relatives of the husband, but it could be that the closest kin were, they were two sisters that, their families both settled there, all different last names. That happens too, because sometimes that bond of sisters is just as important as the bond of brothers. It kind of depends on the dynamics.
Yep.
MK says she has had that they have lots of Alabama homesteaders. Where are your Alabama? Are they clustered, MK, or are they kind of all over the state? Are they in the same county? Because I'm always interested in Alabama homesteaders of any color.
I've got a few that I'm looking into.
In Alabama? Which counties?
Monroe, mostly.
Was it in the 1860s?
They would have been, no, they're later.
Okay.
Later.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So thank you so much, Jessica. Michael, thank you for being here. And Judy MK, thank you so much for being here as well. And I have a new saying. I just made it up today, and Jim's not even here to approve it. So many stories, so much fun, yet so little time. So get cracking. Thank you, guys. I just added that last part, get cracking. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of your day. Don't go anywhere, Jessica. I think. I don't know what's going on. Let's try it one more time. I'm just going to